Signs of the Southland, Sunday, January 8th, 2023. Mr. Grant and Mr. Purdy, there's a very important game happening tomorrow night. That's right. Premier League leading Arsenal heads to Oxford United in the third round of the FA Cup. Catch the goddamn fever. I am excited. I'm not even an Arsenal fan. It's I guess, a London metro area derby. Get hype.
Go
I
Frogs.
don't know what half of those words mean. And this isn't just
You've
for the
heard it.
bit. Like,
We're gonna learn you someday. We're gonna learn you someday.
We're just all wearing purple tomorrow. We're just wearing purple tomorrow. Can we agree to that at least?
Arsenal did have some purple kits back in the day. I agree with wearing purple personally. I'm not even an Arsenal fan. I'm very committed to this bit though. Mr. Purdy, you have in here Wrexham.
Because they won the FA Cup too, right? They're just popular.
They won
in
their
America,
game
and they won a
versus-
match they shouldn't have won.
Yes, they beat Coventry City. I think it was like 5-4.
It was high scoring, but all you Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds fans could be soccer fans today if you wanted to be, because his team is good.
Sidebar: it's very funny that everyone forgets that Rob McElhenney is involved in that.
Yeah, who cares about
And
it?
they made a joke in the show about this that everyone remembers the movie star, but no one remembers the TV star. Rob is like a legitimate star in his own right, but no one remembers that he's involved.
Nope.
It's a very good bit. It's a very good bit. Speaking of more good bits, Georgia Tech football has added more good bits to Brent Key's new coaching staff. Marco Coleman is back at defensive line coach after a stint at Michigan State. Kevin Shearer, who is an NFL coach, was hired as co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. That is per Kelly Quinlan at Rivals. So, for the most part, the 10 on-field coach staff is complete now. I think technically this tweet from our friends at Rivals from Russell Johnson lists 11, but I'll read it out in the spirit of giving. Head coach Brent Key, obviously. Offensive coordinator and tight ends coach Buster Faulkner. Quarterbacks coach Chris Winkie. Running backs coach Norval McKenzie. Wide receivers coach Josh Crawford. Offensive line coach Jeep Wade, defensive coordinator Andrew Thacker, co-defensive coordinator Kevin Shearer. We already talked about him. Marco Coleman, as previously discussed. DB's coach Travaris Tillman, as coming back from last year, and special teams coordinator Jason Seymour. Reading this through now, I assume the head coach does not actually count towards the 10 on-field staff
I do not
number. And I feel very stupid for thinking that this list was wrong because it listed 11. Mr. Purdy, let's start with you. Do you have any thoughts on some of these on-field hires?
I mean, I'm not very informed in terms of who's a great down the line list of position coaches and stuff like that. But I remember just from the discussions we had offline that generally we weren't, just the vibe was, okay, this is good. These are all good. Like, there's nothing here that would like make you scream like, why is this guy here or anything like that. Which I think that is still a kind of the barometer of like where the football team is going. Is it as bad as it could have been beforehand? And all this does not show that. So I think in that sense we're good. I like that someone's coming back to Tech. Like they at least saw that it was worth it to come back and keep going here. Michigan State wasn't as hot as it could have been this year. I mean, they were looking to be good for a second and then weren't. So yeah, I always like that if people are coming back because they want to be back at a good program like us, which hopefully will be great. Then yeah, that's fun. So good for Coleman.
Mr. Grant,
I unboxed this take the other day in our group Slack, and I really think this is as much of an indictment of Coach Coleman's thoughts on working with one Jeff Collins and the career prospects associated with such. So. Yeah. I'll leave that there for sake of not rehashing what is old. But I mean, he's back. That's I thought it was a relatively well managed position group last year, so that's a little odd, but definitely think it is a statement on Jeff just as much as it is on Brent, or at least somewhat. Maybe not equal, but certainly interesting.
Yeah, I saw a couple of notes from people on Discord, a couple of different Discords I'm in, that they're pleased that Brent is surrounding himself with experienced coaching talent, right? Like Kevin Shearer has a pretty long career with a bunch of teams in the NFL. Marco Coleman obviously did a couple of is at Michigan State and at Tech, and then getting into some of the off-field hires, right? Defensive assistant Brian Baker, who actually coached Marco Coleman back at Tech, actually not at Tech in the NFL in the 80s and 90s. And the director of high school relations, Tim McFarland, who's a very experienced high school coach and with a lot of connections. So you're seeing Brent and the athletic department. I think both of them have equal responsibility here, prioritizing experience and some sort of like state of Georgia or Tech connection in some of these hires. And I think we saw more of the latter under Jeff Collins, but not a lot of the former until the very end. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, immediately once Key got hired, and we were kind of aware that the fact he's from Tech was not an insignificant factor in that he was able to get the job. I think the idea that trend or that part of someone's resume would continue to be something that would continue to be a sticking point. And the people that Key played with at this point would be of coaching age too. So it's like he was around a lot of people from that early 2000s, late 90s era that are in that coaching stretch now or in their early coaching careers that are hoping to climb the ladder. So I think all that all makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it mostly seems like it's what should have been done last time. I know that probably sounds a little silly.
Oh, I agree.
Like I'm a little floored that it's like, oh, this seems obvious, instead of landing the chopper, going out and getting a guy with some great Georgia connections, great local connections in terms of managing high school recruiting. Like that just seems like a really concrete, actionable item. And, hopefully it bears fruit. Do I love seeing the G and random capital T thing from some of the new hires on social media stuff? No. But you know what? I'll give the new guys a benefit of the doubt.
I think especially this director of high school relations hire is really big.
Yeah.
I think
that's huge.
The way that I heard about it from some older fans is that there was one at the beginning of Paul Johnson's tenure that came with him from Georgia Southern. And then as soon as that guy retired, the responsibility for maintaining relationships with different high schools was sort of split amongst the staff. So you didn't have one point person for a high school to call up and say, hey, we have this person that would probably fit your program well, or one person to say to go visit that high school and maintain that relationship, or check in on those players. So I think this streamlines your process pretty significantly. It helps you maintain those relationships and in an organized manner where one person has primary responsibility. And it's another concrete investment in the Atlanta area that I don't think the last staff necessarily had.
No, they didn't.
Right. Like this is saying, hey, we are doubling down and we are going to try to moneyball our way insofar as we are going to double down on our relationship with Georgia high schools. We're going to find talent that maybe some of the bigger schools aren't hunting, but can fit our program, and bring them in and develop them and like he said, be a place that people hate to play against.
Yeah. I think it's important here just to note that Georgia's just an insanely talented state. Like we're always going to have a very rich pool of athletic people that could play any position on the field, on a football team, regardless of what it is. And it's important just to go to that high school level because at least if you're a guy showing up to a practice and people know it's from him, then people are talking about the school at practice and in the hallways and just in text and whatever with their friends and stuff like that. So it's just getting the name out there too is a huge part of it beyond at that young level, not just at the college level. Also in a sporting context and not in an academic context too. The academic context will always be there, but the athletic context can be the cool other part of it that people getting younger and younger from us that they may not be aware of it because we haven't been good in anything huge in a long time. So the name isn't naturally out there like other big schools are.
Yeah, and I think one other thing about Georgia as a state in terms of football talent is that it's not over recruited, right? I think there's a lot of discourse about Florida as being everyone goes into Florida, right?
Yeah.
Everyone from that is in like even coaches from Kentucky do really well in Florida. People in Alabama goes down to Florida. People like, programs as far as Minnesota go down to Florida and try to mine talent. Whereas Georgia is only like within the last 10 years or so had this trajectory as being a hotly recruited, or hotly talent producing state. And we're seeing more and more some of these schools, especially the SEC, has tried to build a fence around the Southeast. But you're seeing more and more schools. Notre Dame's coming in and pulling kids from Metro Atlanta. Minnesota a couple of years ago came in and pulled kids from Metro Atlanta. So you're seeing more of the nation take notice. I'm trying. I'm kind of speaking like this is a new phenomenon. It's not. It's like
No.
4 or 5 years old. But this is the competition that you have. You have more national competition and maintaining more direct relationship with those high schools than just giving them one coach that has other responsibilities that to talk to is going to be more beneficial to sending not necessarily that top line of talent, but maybe that second or third line of talent your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like I said, I think it's kind of shocking how obvious it feels, especially in terms of the Tim McFarland thing. Also, for those listening over the air, if I sound a little bit stuffed, I am, and I'm also a little bit hoarse because it's been very rainy and I have a mold allergy. So I'm going to try and limit my, coughing and sneezing and all that into the mic.
Damn, I really wish I had a segue for this. If we had like a cold medicine sponsor, this would be a very good point to throw it in there, but we don't. So I'm just going to make a very awkward transition over to men's basketball. You could say that Miami sort of sneezed this game away late versus Georgia Tech, as Tech was able to pull away with a victory. This was a very fun game, right? Tech showed a lot of grit. I know I'm usually the analytics guy, but Tech showed a lot of fight in this game to keep it close and end up pulling out the W. It's not something that we've seen a lot from Tech over the last 2 years. So, Mr. Grant, let's start with you. While you are not sniffling, what do you have on this one?
Yeah. First off, if they could stop scheduling home games during my church choir practice, that would be delightful. But that being said, I feel like Georgia Tech tends to get a game or two like this every year where things just kind of generally click. Somebody goes off and, you surprise a team you may not have expected to beat. Miami is very talented. Isaiah Wong just became, I believe, their program's all-time leading scorer. So it is a high water mark for them, a storm surge, if you will. But in terms of, I guess, feeling due, it kind of seems like all the pieces kind of coalescing, locking down on defense, not turning over the ball too aggressively. Again, people getting hot at the right time and locking down when they need to. And as Pastner said a couple times, stopping the drip from turning into a flood. So, I think if we recorded this on Thursday or Friday, I'd be, men's basketball, they're hitting that point of the season where under Pastner, they, dolts around through the non-con every year and then kind of on some level pick it up during ACC play. But then Saturday happens, so I don't know that I'd necessarily say that. But at the time, I think the phrase I used was we needed a gas station snacks type of win i.e., surprise somebody. I know this was at home, but it seemed like it felt like that, and we had some momentum going into a down FSU game. But as Andy Demetra said on the broadcast, they're like 51-6 or 52-6 now after playing us in their own building in the last 7 years against ACC foes. So again, not an easy place to win, but it seems like this team needs to start piling up some momentum if it wants to go somewhere. And Wednesday shows that they can, on some level, do that.
Yeah, they have that gear, right? The gear is there to compete. And this was a ranked Miami team. The Florida State team wasn't ranked. They are like 4-11. We'll get there in a second, but this was a top 15 Miami team that came into the game pretty hot, and Tech showed that they can hang and they can compete with some of the maybe not the top line of the ACC, but that second tier, right? That they have that gear in them. And then we get to this FSU game, and you watch that first half, and you're like, okay, they're continuing that momentum from the Miami game, and then you get into the second half, and you blink, and they're down by 20. Mr. Purdy, what do you have on this FSU? I called it a mess in our doc. Debacle is also something that came up in my mind. So, like, how are you feeling about this?
We saw this against Virginia, where they went down 25-0, and then it was done. And then, they have the ability, not the ability, but they have a penchant to just suddenly just not exist for a few minutes, and that's too long in the ACC. It just is a few minutes. Like, if you're not in it the whole time, you're not going to make it happen. That was certainly the case against Miami. They never showed any signs of stopping, being relentless. And their coach was in the presser after was very, very adamant about just how good the defense was in that game and the adjustments they made from the Virginia game to the Miami game. And FSU, that FSU started. That was a hot offensive start because Miles Kelly couldn't miss to start the game. I think it was 4 of 4 from 3 or something like that. But also Florida State was making their shots too. Like, they were never that far behind. So I think the offense clouded how poorly we were playing that game, because it did enough for a little bit to make it a buffer. But then once it kind of came back down to earth, we saw really how much better FSU was playing as a whole that entire game. I turned the game off halfway through the second half because I was like, I could tell what was going on there, and there wasn't going to be any rebound back from how bad it went.
Right. This was a return to form, right? A return to bad form for Tech after that Miami game, in which they had that dip in in-game form and just could not recover at all. Yeah, someone's having trouble with the mute button.
I'm trying not to sneeze into my mic. I told you. I think the thing that makes the Florida State loss sting a little bit more, not just the fact that they're an Florida State team this year.
They're more than an Florida State team. Let's be clear about that.
The thing that makes it sting is that Georgia Tech was winning. Miles Kelly could not miss. No one could miss. And then it just vanished after 10 minutes. It honestly felt a lot like the LSU game at Holiday Hoops Giving last year, where Tech comes out really strong. Everyone's clicking. Everything seems like it's working. Defense, offense, just the whole gamut. And I don't know if they're tired and they don't have the conditioning, or which seems silly to say because Lance Terry played a full game on Wednesday. But hey, maybe you can't expect the Jose Alvarado, Moses Wright 40 minutes for an entire season strongman to come from everyone, because that takes a special kind of crazy. So who knows if it's tired or Florida State figuring out. I mean, they've got a great staff over there, so maybe they did figure some things out, but it's just disappointing.
I'll note that after the Virginia game, because that was after a week of practice, a couple of people in the press room asked Josh about, like, hey, was the fact that y'all basically ran for a week and like did a lot of conditioning, like, did that impact your performance against Virginia? And they didn't really say yes. But then when Lance played all 40 against Miami, the first question to Lance was, "You look tired out there at the end there." And he's like, he was like, "Yeah, I totally was." Thankfully, he got that last 3 to kind of cement the deal there at the end. But something energy wise doesn't stick all the way there. There isn't like that emotional component that can override whatever physical condition they're currently in. There's that extra just mental state of just like, we got this no matter what. That I think they can get there. I really like the attitude of a couple of these guys on the team. I don't think they're necessarily a poorly like a team with an attitude issue. But at times it's just they're just blank in the face for a little too long.
I think for me, it kind of comes back to the way that Pastner organizes his team, not necessarily in the tactical sense, but just he's always kept a short bench, right? And I'd have to go back and look at the usage rates for the last two games, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him only play
those last two games.
Yeah. So of course these guys are tired, right? Like,
but it's normal too. Like, I mean, some teams will, unless they're killing us, will only play like 9, 10 guys anyways too. So it's not a huge difference of who we're playing too, and everyone's got the same grinded schedule at this point too. So like, it's just par for the course.
Let me offer this, and this might be coming from me being more of a basketball layman, but let me offer this. Everyone plays 8 guys, but what is the distribution of minutes amongst those 8 guys? Right. Are those bottom 3 or are those 3 bench guys getting like 15, 20 minutes a game, or are we operating with or are all of your starters in for 30, 35 minutes? Then what's the point of having the other 3 guys on the bench come in and be rotational, right? Like it just doesn't. You've eliminated that rotate, like those. You're playing the same number of people, but you've eliminated a rest advantage. Yeah. If your starters are still playing 30-something minutes.
I pulled out the final box scores for the Miami and Virginia games. We played 8 men in both games. In terms of bench minutes against Virginia, Miles Kelly played 28, Javon 22, Davon 8. Against Miami, Javon played 13, Kyle Sturdivant 8, and Davon 21. Who was out of the lineup? Someone switch? Oh, I don't. Anyways, so bench minutes wise, so
they're getting pretty significant time on average.
Yeah.
So what about the start? Like, what is the average minutes numbers of the starters?
Starters against Virginia, it was in the mid-20s ish. Debo played the most at 33. Jalen played the least at 21, and then Rodney Howard, Lance Terry, and Kyle were all within 27 to 29. Against Miami was a big variation. Jalen Moore didn't even play half the game. He played 19:36. Lance played the whole game, and then Rodney played 26, and Debo and Miles both played 35 or more. Davon Smith got a decent amount of time there. So, I mean, it's also totally determined on like who's hot, who's not, what you needed in a given moment in a certain game as well. So
tactics,
I think,
yeah.
Tactics wise, that changes a lot of things. Lance was just working the whole game. Like, he was critical out there. He was drawing fouls. He led with 24 points. Like, he did everything that was needed. And without him, I mean, it was going to not go well. Also, I think he had to play more because Kyle Sturdivant wasn't really working out. So in a lot of ways, that was a 7-man game for Tech, less than an 8-man. And both these, Davon played 8 against Virginia. So it's 7 plus someone for a little bit in spots.
Yeah, so maybe it is more of a conditioning thing, like you're saying. Like, you have a pretty reasonable rotation of bench players. They're playing a reasonable number of minutes, but if you're still not able to keep pace for all 40 with all 8 guys, then there's potentially a conditioning issue, right?
Jake, if you have something, I have one more thing, unless you have a note.
Yeah, I mean, my take was just going to be that it seems like we needed a momentum building win, and we got it early in the week, and I just think it feels like we're in the same place we started, right? It's Georgia Tech, and how many times have we heard this before? Some offensive success, and then is really cold for a while, or just doesn't take advantage, or again, part of my color is being informed by having listened on the radio. Love Andy and the gang there. They do a phenomenal job. So, but that does kind of, I didn't necessarily see every play with my own eyes, even though I, listened to all but the first 15 minutes of the first half of the Miami game. But, it's tough. It seems like it's a lot of the same stuff we've been saying. And I'm glad that it seems like there's a lot of talent on the team, and I think Pastner's right when he says he has more than 5 starters. But man, I don't know. Just seems like we can't put it together
Yeah.
consistently, and that's
Did y'all
disappointing.
did y'all hear in the Miami press conference who he attributed the win to or why they won?
I
I
did
mean, I
not.
listened to it twice, but I'm drawing a blank.
Uh, Mrs. Cabrera.
Yeah.
They
The
were
power
I
of
have.
positivity
the
book
power.
thing.
Yes, he read the
Yeah.
power of positivity, and then was like all in on it. Made it a thing in practice and whatnot, and like that was the first thing he brought up in the press conference. Like he's like he had
God,
energy
oh
vibes after
my
the Virginia game. It was
God.
like it was all that. Um, yeah,
That
that
is
was
such a Pastner.
the
Oh.
Cabreras were a significant factor in winning the Miami game.
You could say
When
that
the
they're a
president
significant factor
of the
in.
universe, when the first lady of the university is the first person you're crediting in beating a top
I don't
15
remember if it was the
team.
first person he credited to, but there was a lot of time devoted to talking about that book and what it did to how he approached teaching the team that week.
You could
That
write a
said,
book on this man's press conferences.
Yeah,
I do want to say I talked to Jack a little bit on the side or mentioned it to him. Jack was in the press conference. I think all that being said about the FSU game, I really liked how Miles Kelly answered the question that you asked, and it does make me feel confident that they're prepping well, or at least doing the things that one might expect them to do. Jack, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all, since you're the one that asked the question, but
yeah.
I at least came away with wait, I should probably say what the question was.
I mean, I
Basically,
remember it.
Jack, go for it.
Yeah, no, the question I had was during the Virginia game, I noticed in the first half they got every corner three imaginable and then counted, and it was 11 in total. And then Miami had two. And so, like, okay, that's interesting. They either figured something out or Miami didn't scout it. And so I asked Miles about it, and they were like, they made a concerted effort. And this was his answer. Like, he made a concerted, they had made a concerted effort to expand their wing defense and kind of shut down the corners a little bit more. And Miami didn't have that shot. They took a lot of threes, but they just didn't take them in the corner. And
It's an
so,
interesting look into how they're preparing, right?
yep.
Like you said, it does signal that they are noting what mistakes they're making and then accounting for them in a future in a future game.
Immediately, 2 3 days later, like it made a huge difference, and they held. I forgot the guy's name at Miami, who's their leading scorer, but he made one bucket
Long.
all game. Like, they shut him down. They had looks. Miami had looks. They were just missed. They missed a lot of shots that they should have made.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're wrong about missing ones they should have made, and I think that's the difference, right? When Tech's defense is super effective, see, I would argue it's been a hallmark of the entire Pastner era. The NIT season, where they went to the NIT championship, comes to mind there too. But an effective defense is really critical, and you know we're just in year two of not having the all world center type situation to anchor that. So I think that's kind of why we've been seeing a little hit or miss there too. But anyways, not to belabor any points here.
Uh, just to move us along, next game is Tuesday, the 10th at 7 p.m. at Notre Dame. That'll be in South Bend on ACC Network. Notre Dame, if you are curious, 8-8, 0-5 in conference. So Mike Bray and the gang also looking for a victory. They are on a 3-game losing streak. We'll be back to talk about the women's side of Zelnak Center in just a few moments after this short break.
You know what, Akshay? I had a comment about Mike Bray and the gang, but that's in the past, and we don't dwell in the past here at Scions of the Southland. What we do dwell in is comfortable t-shirts and apparel. As you all know, Section 103 is a proud partner for this fine podcast. To be partnering with Fine Manufacturing is a real treat. As you know, you can find them at section103.com, at section 103 on Twitter. And as you also know, there's free shipping on orders over $70 every day. Orders have recommenced their shipping. It is a small business, so those are a little bit intermittent at times, but they're back out there sending out all the great tech apparel that you know and love. I wore my tech full zip with the baseball styled lettering to the ice rink yesterday when I was going skating, and found it very comfortable for slightly chilly weather, and also looking good out in public. So definitely go check them out at section103.com.
Welcome back to Signs of the Southland for January 8th. Let's skip over to the women's side of the Zelnak Center. They put together two very interesting games, albeit two losses this week. One to Louisville, 55-63. Yes, I'm reading it the European way. And one at Wake, 50-51. Let's start with the Louisville game. I felt like this was a pretty winnable game on paper and even how it played out, despite Haley Van Lith being Haley Van Lith. Wouldn't you say?
As for winnable game, I would definitely agree. Tech really hung around essentially all night. HVL is a phenomenal player. Actually, when I was up at Louisville, the only person I saw more of in the bookstore with merch was Lamar Jackson. So, Lamar Jackson and HVL, number 1 and number 2. But, Tech struggles to be consistent, I think, is a charitable way to say that. Remarkable how often we say that about basketball, but neither here nor there. We've got, like you said, a winnable game. And, it's tough when basketball is a game of runs and you're not scoring. I think probably the most notable thing about this year, especially without Lorella Kubai, is there's no safety outlet right in the middle to just give it to your really tall, really effective center for two. And I think, with the floor having to be spread and the offense looking different, this game of runs is something that's definitely affected Tech more. And I think that's pretty clear, especially in both games this week, honestly. And we'll talk about Wake in just a minute.
One of the things that you noticed, Mr. Purdy, was Louisville applying a pretty textbook and very effective full court press a bunch of times in this game, especially during the second quarter, in which Tech had a ton of turnovers that resulted out of the press. Yep. Want to expand on that a little bit more?
It's been a consistent problem this whole year. I remember from the first few games, like, this was just a thing that this team wants to play fast. They've said as much. They want to play as fast as they can. And yet, as soon as they get doubled in the backcourt, they just cripple under pressure sometimes. They've figured it out in some cases to get the passing down, but it just doesn't happen really. Notably with Bianca and Cam on the floor. With the freshman lineup, it's been different. There was one possession where Tony just bull rushed her way up the floor and just got out of it. Just bodied her way through, which is like kind of what you should do there, if you can, and avoid a charge. And Louisville took advantage of it. Tech, when pressured in the backcourt, responds poorly and has all season. Today against Wake Forest, they only did it twice. So it worked. It worked the first time. It didn't work the second time. But there's something there that they have not figured out fully of how to escape that, at least with Bianca and Cam on the floor when they're kind of ISO balling, but not really. Like, they're doing a real point guard situation. When the freshman crew's on the floor, it looks a lot different.
And that brings up a good point, actually. As one of the things that we noticed in the Louisville game, Swartz and Jackson were on the bench to start, and Noguero and Dunn were on the court. It was Dunn's first career start, and it was the same lineup for this game versus Wake. Let's talk about that a little bit. How did you see Tech's tactics get adjusted for having both of the freshmen on the floor, Mr. Purdy?
Cam and Bianca are both, when they have their shot, they're going to shoot kind of people, and they're good, and they're good shooters in their own rights. That's how they've earned that ability to do that, and I think it's a big part of why this offense was built the way it was. Let's get them open looks, get them shooting early and often to just rack up as many points as you can. And it kind of worked. I mean, we played some good teams in the front half of the year. We beat Belmont twice. We beat Michigan State. Like, there were some good teams that we got through, or that they got through. And then it wasn't really working. As soon as ACUC ball started, that just wasn't the case anymore. And when Inez Noguero got on the floor, she would hit threes, and she would hit them at a good clip, like 44% or something like that. Kara Dunn is very energetic, not the best on rebounding or defense, along with Noguero, but they provide a different kind of spark that's It creates a more cohesive offense than Bianca or Cam did, where you're just looking to get them the ball and just go from there. There's far less hero ball going on, and Tony Morgan's kind of fit with both styles in terms of like being a distributor, getting rebounds, and can work around the rim as well. And so when Bianca and Cam are not on, like they've been the last 2 games, their shooting percentage the last 2 games has been under 30%. The rest of the team shot 43%. And that includes with these freshmen starting lineup. So if something works a little bit better here, hopefully it's just a cold streak for Bianca and Cam. That's my hope and prayer there, because Cam is still one of the best pure shooters I've seen in women's basketball play for Tech in recent memory. So I don't know. There's something there. It's 2 different styles of offense there. The defense probably is better with the older players on the floor, but yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
You have to make that trade-off, right? You have to figure out and say, like, hey, am I willing to get a little bit more messy defensively with a little inexperience, but get more offensive firepower? And this is something that the commentators on today's weight game also talked about, right? These teams that we were watching were I think both bottom 5 in the league, or maybe bottom 2 in the league in terms of scoring offense, but they were both top 5 in scoring defense.
Yeah.
Right. So you have obviously not advanced stats. I didn't pull my advanced stats guide bit, but like it's just, you have to be a bit able to evaluate that trade-off at certain points of the game. And I think this is something that, again, it paid off for vast stretches it paid off for almost the entirety of the weight game. I think we'll talk about the last couple of possessions in a second here. And it would have paid off, I think, in the Louisville game, at least with the way that they tweaked the lineup and the way that they played, but Tech just went ice cold in the middle, right? If you look at the game flow chart, there are 2 massive horizontal lines in that second quarter, split by one little like 4-point scoring run. So just, they have to focus on, it sounds so basic, but they have to focus on putting the ball into the orange hoop.
Yeah, and I'll know after the Florida State game, which even though was just a horrible loss, I asked Nell, because Inez had a good game though. Like she played a far smarter, far more tactile, not tactile. She just looked really good on the court. She was playing a different game out there, and I asked her, did this earn Inez more playing time? And he was like, who knows, maybe, but then immediately talked about, well, she's still got to defend on the other side of the floor, which I think in context, after they had allowed 99 points, like, that's just the thought in the mind of any coach there, is like, how the hell did we allow 99 points in a 40-minute game? But then 3 days later, rolls out the nearly all-freshman lineup. So something clicked there that was worth trying out, that was different.
Many are saying that Inez Nahuero is Georgia Tech's best central midfielder. The 8-10 hybrid that was promised, I'm told. Mr. Grant, let's talk about that the last couple of possessions down the stretch in this away game. Very, very frustrating end to this one, I would say.
Do we have to talk about them?
I'm making you, unfortunately.
I have a point after this, but keep going.
In all seriousness, this was a very back and forth game. Never too out of hand one way or the other. And Georgia Tech did have a lead late. They had a lead late in the first half as well. But when it came down to it, Wake scored 2. They were able to draw an and 1 late. There was several missed free throws, including with Cam Schwartz getting fouled with the opportunity not only to shoot to tie, but to take the win. She missed both. Tech fouled again. They missed both on the Wake end, and then with 2 seconds, they did have the opportunity to shoot and score. But despite getting a reasonable, I would say, shot, I have no shame in taking it. You got to take what you can get, and I don't think they were going to get much better than that. Right into traffic and no dice in what would have been the game winner. So again, Georgia Tech with the chance to win, but just really, I would say generally kind of sloppy. Definitely not the prettiest finish I've seen to end a half.
It was rough. It was rough. Mr. Purdy, you get the last word before we move on to talk about their schedule this week.
this is a very young. I mean, going to the freshman means there's a lot of new things that have to get figured out. Like this is in some ways going back to square one and restarting this team in a lot of ways. And and I think in those growing pains, the big one that's come out to me is getting the ball out before the shot clock's going off. The Louisville game
that happened multiple times.
Louisville game had 3 violations I can remember, and a couple just heaves because they just couldn't get something, but at least we're aware of it. Today, I think, had 1. Wake Forest had 2, I think. But then at the very end there, just didn't get the shot off. Granted, it wasn't a freshman. I should know. I mean, she was in tears immediately after she didn't get that shot off. So, she knew. It was. I don't blame her for not knowing the situation or anything like that. But still, you just got to get the shot off sometime whenever you can. So that's been the trade-off here with the new people. Is it may not be the fastest offense, at least milks clock, but sometimes they just can't get themselves in positioning.
This week's game versus Miami is going to be really interesting. That is Thursday night at 8 p.m. That'll be on ACC Network Extra. I believe that is a home game as well. Miami took out number 9 Virginia Tech today. So I think the first message that I sent in our Slack about that was that we are in danger. But we'll see. I think there's some room for improvement, obviously, from the Wake and the Louisville games. And Miami is clearly a team capable of beating some of that top line talent in the ACC. But if Tech is going to play with that all freshman lineup, they're going to play that same sort of slow triple option Iowa basketball stuff where they milk the clock. I'm not cautiously optimistic is where I'm willing to put the line. I think that's sort of where I am with this team at this season. It's been one of those years, Let's move to Macaulay Aquatic Center. Friday featured a weird double meet situation, one versus SCAD and one versus Texas A&M.
I've maintained this podcast almost 5 years old at this point, which is horrifying to think about.
For only 150 episodes too.
Yeah, but I think every one of those 5 seasons we've swum against SCAD, which is an NAIA team. I have no idea why we do it to this day. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I will leave it at that. And then we did get 2 SEC teams, so Texas A&M and Auburn on Saturday. The good news is that these are streamed on ACC Network again. I was not seeing that a while back, but the bad news is that Tech lost to both teams. I will note, very importantly, that Auburn is ranked 9 and 19th on the men's and women's sides. So not like they were swimming against teams that were not very good. I think one of the Texas A&M teams is ranked. I can't remember which side. I forgot to write it down when I looked because I'm dumb. In terms of the Auburn meet,
good podcasting.
Again, 9 and 19. They're quite good. The men's score was 213 to 87, and the women 218 to 82. That's a little bit cleaner of a comp since it's just Auburn rather than the triangle meet. I will note diving has long been a standout, I think, for us. You may remember Cami Hidalgo, recent graduate, Ruben Lechuga, who I believe is still around, but I didn't see his name on the results when I was looking for zone diving records, things like that, just to pull out. But we did have Anna Bradskew, Carmen Woodruff, and Elijah Clear finish in zone territory. So that's good, at least. Other than that, like I said, pretty Auburn skewed. That's kind of been a theme of some of our more ranked meets this year, and it's been a rebuilding year for them in the pool.
Rebuilding in the pool is just a very interesting turn of words. How does that work?
That does remind me of the time recently they had a huge, I guess 3-4 years ago now, that they had a huge scaffolding in the middle of one of the 2 pools because they're doing work on the vents. So usually, I mean, when I said building in the pool, that's kind of what I thought of. Haha, very funny. But no,
we have to make some sort of non sequitur. The Texas A&M and Auburn situation, scoring wise, we're
They were quite bleak, but we did see Mert Kilvus also win 2 events, while Batar Unlu won the 200 free. So that's pretty good to see. And
Quality losses.
I can't remember the last time I've seen Georgia Tech beat an SEC school in the 50 freestyle. So Anna Hadjiluiozo, that's tough. I apologize. I know that's not right. But the Tech women winning a sprint event against an SEC school, no less the 50 free, that's not bad. I mean, we gotta win a lot more events, but I mean, the 50 free is usually an event that the best of the best can throw, eight, 10 kids at you that are all blazing speed. So, hey, that's something at least.
Let's move over to the tennis courts. Let's move over to Ken Byers. Women's tennis at least has their schedule out. They are 25th in the ITA rankings, the latest ITA rankings. I believe the first one of the spring season. Let's do our old friend, the schedule reading. Mr. Grant, do you have it open, and do you want to do the honors?
I do, and I will, because I am great at reading the tennis schedule. I do this every year. So
can you do this in a low, gravelly voice like Stephen Godfrey, your favorite journalist?
Should I just rub my hand over the mic, to make it nice and scratchy? No.
ASMR. Science does ASMR.
Carolina kickoff to start the year. South Carolina's been a very comparable team to us the last few years. Had a very memorable NCAA win on their courts a couple years back. So good to see them. We'll be up there 3 days. Usual mid-state or midweek type stuff. We do have to head to Berkeley for the ITA kickoff weekend. Tech is not hosting that this year. The women have hosted that for quite a long time, but they're top 25, not top 16. So that's how that works. For those that don't know how those all get selected, it's a whole weird draft process that I do not have time to go into right now.
We've also definitely done an episode on it.
We have. I don't know which episode it was, but it was 30 minutes of us puzzling over this whole draft thing. It's very strange, but at least it's more public than certain things the NCAA does. Georgia Tech does have a interesting road swing where they'll go up to Champaign-Urbana to face off against Illinois on a Friday, and also grab Northwestern. Both of those schools are pretty good at tennis, particularly Illinois. Illinois has been very much nationally ranked of recent years, and they have a great facility. They've hosted a couple of the ITA, indoor-y type events. So it'll be great to square up with them. If they win the ITA kickoff, the national team indoors are up at Washington in Seattle this year. So may or may not be going to that. And they'll also host Gonzaga, which is a new name on there. And weirdly, it's not preemptively scheduled in Spokane. It's Gonzaga coming to visit Tech on a weekend where they also play UGA in Athens. So double dose of Bulldogs, very odd. And after that, they're into the ACC slate. In terms of the ACC slate, it's 12 matchups. You're not gonna. I guess it's not 12. Is it 12? I can't remember. Did somebody else cut a tennis team? Anyways, we get everyone who's still playing tennis at least once. I know Pitt recently cut theirs. I can't remember if anyone else did. So it's either 13 or 12. UCF will be a midweeker in there as well, impostering in the middle of the ACC slate. And then after that, the ACC tennis championships are back up in Cary, North Carolina. So no more Rome, but yeah, that's women's tennis. I know that was kind of long and winded, but basically the things to watch for are really the entire ACC slate, because almost everyone is really, really good. Georgia Tech's been at the top of the pile. Obviously the UGA in Athens is going to be tough. They are a pretty good tennis team and a little scary to play, but that's why you play good opponents. And then the Illinois and ITA kickoff weekends to circle those as well. I believe the men have dropped theirs as well, because I saw that they have a match against Presbyterian coming up as well.
They did not put it on Instagram, which is where I got the women's schedule from. So now I will be checking Twitter.
It's up. The men are doing this interesting thing where they already have their non-con in and have loaded up on some wins, which I think will be good for them, because this is a team that's been needing just a couple more like W's in the W column, not like strength of schedule, to really put themselves as a more consistent tournament team of late. To this example, they opened the season with Furman, Presbyterian twice, Wofford, and Alabama State. That is a great opportunity to get some wins. So I actually really like seeing that. And then their ITA kickoff is out at Stanford, so they're in the field for ITA kickoff. That's a 64-team field, so really good to see them in the mix. Stanford's tough, and whoever else they play out there will probably be tough, no matter if it's for a slot at indoors or just a consolation type game. They'll get Georgia State. They have a pretty heavy SEC slate as always. Auburn, South Carolina, Georgia are pretty typical appearers on there, and they'll also get the Citadel at home before opening up the ACC slate. Again, they play everyone once before the ACC championships, also in Cary. So keep that ACC stuff circled. Those are going to be your big matches. There's a lot more going on, I'd say, on the men's schedule, just in terms of that non-con action. So something to keep in mind.
Let's round out with a couple other notes. Mr. Purdy, give me some Construction Corner update.
Construction Corner. We talked last week about we're sure the rec garage was done. It is done. You can go walk up to it. You can sit next to it. All the stuff is done around it. We don't know when the actual when the rec goes.
The grand opening is in March.
Yeah, so the rec's not actually in there, right?
Mid-March.
Yeah, so the rec's not actually there. It's just a building that's empty right now that will soon be used.
I guess my understanding is that the rec will not be using the space officially until it is actually grand opened. We also, fun fact, we now know the anonymous donor that actually paid for the whole place. So there's that.
We do. I don't have the picture in front of me. I don't have my phone, so I can't.
Wallace, class of 68.
Something like that. And then also, I was walking around campus yesterday. There's just a large pile of sand in the walkway between Coons and Skiles, the psychology building and the LMC building. They didn't take out any of the concrete. All that's still there for the staircase walkway. There's just a lot of sand there. I can't tell if they're in some sort of one of those excavator things. I can't tell if they're taking out a tree or replanting some stuff or something, but there's just it's caution taped off and everything. So something's going on there. Beyond that, nothing huge. I had mentioned in the summer that they were doing stuff in front of the CRC. That all that fencing's gone. I think it was just all underground pipe work or something like that. There is a pipe going in the walkway, that main stretch on the bottom of Kolk by the new whatever it is white sculpture that leads you up to the Campanile fountain. That is blocked off right now, and they took out a segment of the walkway that there's piping going in under there as well. So some big walkways are currently not usable as classes start when you listen to this today.
Moving over to club sports, Mr. Grant, give me the latest update on hockey.
Yeah, hockey opened up their kind of short-looking spring slate with a 2-0 weekend, 6-2 and 8-5 wins over Kennesaw State. So that gives them a 14-7 advantage aggregate. Of note, Matthew Connolly becomes Tech's all-time leading scorer. I know he's been around for a bunch of years, so great to see him notch that achievement as well. The Savannah Hockey Classic is up next. They'll play Florida State and UGA. That's a really fun environment. Definitely, if you are looking for a last-minute trip to Savannah, consider that. That moves them to 8-10-1-1 at the moment. So 2 wins next weekend would put them not just back at 500, but in possession of the Southeast's most coveted cup. The 4th team involved there will be UF. They play the interstate and then the inter-conference rivalries there. So UF will take FSU and UGA as well, but we will not see them. They will not see each other, et cetera, et cetera. You get the point.
Last couple of notes, softball and baseball previews. Those seasons are coming up in February. We'll have a couple of notes, a couple of interviews from our dear friend Jack here momentarily. No other sports active right now other than the ones you mentioned. Mr. Grant, to close us out, you have a question from your bevy of statistics.
Yes. So, seeing as my ACC results page was getting a little bit stale, I decided to incorporate a new tab into my little sheet of fun. In this tab, we collate every ACC title that's ever been awarded in every sport. So there's really a lot going on here. But today, my question, gents, is very simple. Who is the most historically, we'll say, unlucky team across all sports in the ACC? There's no waiting for football or basketball in terms of what is fortune or unfortunate in terms of this. Just give me by rate, as in opportunities to win conference titles versus the actual number that they've won. Which of the 15 members of the ACC is the most snake bitten?
See, my instinct is to say NC State, but I know of their record in cross country, so I don't want to say NC State.
My inclination is to pick Notre Dame with all 100 years they've been in the ACC, dating back to 2017. My actual answer is Wake Forest.
Wow, Wake Forest is a good answer. I will say, by one metric, they are the most snake bitten, but I personally don't think that that's the right way to judge just because that metric is surplus or deficit of titles, right? So the winning a title or sharing would be half, but winning would be +1 or losing would be 1 over the number of teams competing. By that metric, Wake Forest is the most snake bitten. They are 58 titles down, if you will, in the hole, which is by far the most. The team that I identified here as the answer is the second in this category, and just the other ones just knock my socks off. So I had to pick them. Again, just to kind of round out the Wake Forest note, Wake Forest has 55 conference titles across all sports. They compete in 18 sports currently, have competed in 999 total ACC seasons. So one would expect them to have about 113 and a half titles. So that's our context. Akshay, on NC State, you were correctly pointed out that they have had tremendous success in women's cross country, and I think men's too, but their swim and dive also floats them way up towards the top. So despite their historic curse in not just baseball and men's basketball and football, they have lots and lots of non-rev things to fall back on. They have 140 titles won across 184 seasons for a success rate of 11.8%, which really is not that bad. And they are only down in surplus or deficit titles by 0.75. So that's really rather delightfully mediocre, and I would say delightfully on brand. However, the answer to this question, I've drawn it out long enough. In 423 seasons of competition, since 2004-05, I forget which one, when they joined the ACC, they have won one conference title across all 25 sports in which they compete. This is a success rate of 0.2%. So 0.002. This is Boston College.
Oh God!
Won I feel bad. Very lonely men's soccer title that they won in 07. So they got in, won the one, haven't done anything since. They are expected to have won by this model 41.03 conference titles, putting them negative 40.027 in the hole.
Oh my goodness!
Look, one soccer title, that's called the Matt Ryan effect, right there.
It is.
He just lost the conference title game twice. I don't see what the
No,
they'd only be 38 in the hole if he had won both of those. So there you go.
Boy. Can they get demoted to ACCB? Do we have a second tier here? Can we? I think once we expand to 20 teams, that seems like a reason we got to do a 10-10 here somehow.
Yeah, I will say they have the lowest success rate by far. Only coming close to them is South Carolina for when they were in the conference, who finished with a success rate of 1.7%, which is 9 times better than Boston College's success rate. Also in the cellar with them are Pitt, Miami, and kind of surprisingly Louisville. And then there's kind of a jump, and you'll get to the Wake, Tech, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech tier. So very interesting to see how that stuff shakes out.
Nine times is also about the amount that South Carolina's TV revenue went up when they left the ACC, but that's neither here nor there. Mr. Grant, I think that about wraps it up for us today. Why don't you take us home?
Yeah, as always, you know where to find us. You can find this podcast wherever fine podcasts are distributed. That's Spotify, Apple. Rate and review if you're really feeling led. I don't usually plug that, but I usually forget. So there you go. In terms of other places to find us and our friends, you can find Section 103 at Section 103 on Twitter and section103.com. You can find the site at fromtherumbleseat.com. Articles get posted with these podcasts every week. You can comment there, follow along for the rest of the gang's great content that they put out. You can email us at fromtherumbleseat@gmail.com. We really read those comments, those emails, and the replies to at FTRS blog on Twitter. And we work to incorporate that feedback into the show. So if anything comes to mind, please, by all means, let us know. You can find Jack at Jack Nicholas. You can find me at Jake Grant98 on Twitter. And you can also find From the Rumble Seat on the Meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram at From the Rumble Seat. As always, thanks for bearing with us. Good night, good luck, and go Jackets.